Why are airplane windows not square like car windows? Why are there holes in airplane windows when the interior environment of the plane and the outside atmosphere should never meet? If you think the reason for the windows being round and having holes is pressure, you are partially right. However, there are some critical points in the story. Let's touch upon why these windows were preferred after many attempts. Imagine a plane at sea level taking on passengers, closing all its airtight doors tightly, and taking off. And suppose a system that balances internal pressure with atmospheric pressure has not yet been produced for this plane. Do you know what would happen when the plane reached its standard cruising altitude of 10,000 meters? The plane would start to swell like a balloon. When it landed, the balloon would return to its original state. This is because the plane with sea level pressure encounters the low pressure at 10,000 meters altitude. At that moment, the low atmospheric pressure, which cannot resist the higher pressure inside the plane, causes the plane to expand. So when was this first noticed? This actually stems from a tragedy. Until the beginning of the 1950s, which was the infancy of modern civil aviation, aircraft designs did not have the technical infrastructure to reach the high altitudes of today. However, everything changed completely when the Comet model, produced by the British aviation company de Havilland, took to the skies as the world's first jet-powered passenger plane. Comet could fly at much higher altitudes than its propeller-driven rivals, thus rising above air turbulence and offering its passengers a unique, smooth, and fast flight experience. The biggest advantage of flying at high altitude was the reduction of friction due to the low air density, and the maximization of fuel efficiency. This was exactly what airlines struggling with costs wanted. However, this high-altitude advantage brought with it a massive physical problem that engineers could not fully foresee until that day, namely the necessity of cabin pressurization. While these debates were ongoing, in 1954, two de Havilland Comet planes suddenly broke apart and crashed into the Mediterranean while at cruising altitude shortly after takeoff, without any obvious engine failure or pilot error in the air. In order to find the cause of these mysterious accidents, scientists and engineers of the period placed the fuselage of the plane into massive water tanks and subjected them to artificial pressurization tests that lasted for months. High pressure was applied to the fuselage of the plane consecutively thousands of times, and then this pressure was released. Finally, the moment the fuselage exploded when the metal's fatigue limit was exceeded was recorded by laboratory cameras. Technical examinations unequivocally revealed that the disintegration started exactly from those sharp corner points of the square windows. While there are square windows even in the tallest skyscrapers and the fastest sports cars, it is not a problem. So why is it a problem in airplanes? I can hear you asking this. Pressure coming onto a round-shaped window travels to all corners and is transferred to the metal fuselage. Since there are countless corners in a round window, the pressure is transferred to the metal homogeneously. But this does not happen when windows are square or have sharp corners. The pressure continues to travel on the window until it reaches the corners. The pressure accumulating at the extreme points of the square causes a lot of stress in these areas and causes the windows to be damaged from this region. The corners of square windows are exposed to 3 times more physical stress than other parts of the fuselage. In every flight cycle, microscopic cracks invisible to the naked eye form in these corners, metal fatigue hits the ceiling, and eventually, the plane's fuselage tears like paper from those weak points. Why were holes placed inside the windows while even the shape of the windows was changed to maintain the pressure difference? You might think this is a contradiction. If you like our videos where we explain the working principles of airplanes and the world's largest machines with simple 3D models, don't forget to subscribe. Airplane windows have a 3-layered structure. You might have noticed this during a flight. 3 glass panels have come together like a sandwich. Airplane windows are produced from a material called acrylic. This material is more flexible than glass. Making the windows from this material makes it harder for them to break due to a bird strike or similar problem during flight. Only the middle window of these 3 windows has a small hole. So, in fact, contrary to what is thought, the interior environment of the plane and the outside atmosphere never constantly touch each other. So what is the purpose of this hole in the middle window? This tiny hole actually eliminates many problems. Let's examine them in order. When the plane reaches 10,000 meters, the outside temperature drops to -50 degrees. When this cold air collides with the hot air inside the cabin, condensation occurs and the window freezes instantly. This obstructs the view. Air constantly passes through the small hole on the middle window between the outer window and the inner window. Thanks to this 3-layered structure of the window and the hole in between, the air between the windows constantly circulates. This balances the humidity on the window and completely prevents the window from fogging or freezing. The most solid part of this three-layered structure is the window panel on the outside of the plane. This window is thicker and stronger than the others and is mounted smoothly to the plane surface. This outermost thick layer is tested and produced to not break even if it hits a bird while the plane is traveling at 800 to 900 kilometers per hour. In fact, in laboratory tests, the durability of these windows is measured by firing dead chickens at them with high-speed artificial launchers. So, the small hole in between allows the high pressure inside the cabin to hit this most solid window directly. The truly brilliant engineering function of this hole appears when the worst-case scenario occurs. If the outer window of the plane suddenly cracks or bursts due to an object flying in the air hitting it or an unexpected structural fault, that spare air gap between the two windows comes into play. The moment the outer window bursts, the high-pressure air inside the cabin will want to escape at high speed. At this point, that tiny breathing hole in the middle window dramatically restricts the speed and amount of air escaping. The hole is so small that it prevents the air from suddenly emptying and prevents the cabin pressure from dropping suddenly. Meanwhile, the middle window takes over the duty of the outer window, closing that massive hole formed in the plane's fuselage and gaining vital minutes for the pilots to land the plane at a safe altitude. The third layer on the inside, which passengers can directly touch, is a thin protective plastic called the inner window. This layer has no pressure holding feature or structural task. Its only reason for existence is to prevent passengers from accidentally or intentionally scratching the middle window, dirtying it, or damaging it with any object that would block that life-saving small hole. The inner window acts as a simple but effective barrier that provides insulation between passenger comfort and system safety. When you look at the plane, while the spaces between all windows are the same, why are the seats not aligned with the windows? The misalignment of airplane windows and seats stems from the clash between the plane's production engineering and the commercial strategies of airline companies. Manufacturing firms like Boeing or Airbus place the windows on the walls at equal and standard intervals to protect the integrity of the plane's fuselage and its aerodynamic strength. However, airline companies that buy the plane design the seat rows independently of these windows in order to increase passenger capacity and profitability. When companies narrow the seat intervals to fit more seats, the window arrangement that comes standard from the factory and the subsequently added seat lines shift completely, and this causes some passengers to travel while looking at the wall. As in many parts of the plane, engineers need to think more deeply about their windows. In our previous videos, we examined the plane's vacuum toilet system, that the majority of the fuel is stored in the wings, and what the trails they leave behind the plane are. All of them are systems that have no similarity whatsoever with any other vehicle. Airplanes and aviation engineering will always continue to surprise us. In our new videos, we will continue to present these to you.